Mr. Rohan, thank you very much for talking to KTV.
It's a great pleasure.
It's been 10 years since independence. How much do you think Kosovo has gone till now?
Well, in my view, the balance is a mixed one. There are positive things which happened. Kosovo as a state has, first of all, been recognized by many countries. It has consolidated, institutions have consolidated, the democratic processes are taking place. Kosovo has become a member of a number of international organizations, and above all, the relationship with the European Union has developed with the signing of a stabilization and association agreement. So that's all positive, and for me, who has been connected with Kosovo for almost 30 years, if I take the long view, looking back, I must say the Kosovars never have had it as good as now. In the 90s, they were oppressed, they were living in a colonial regime. In the next decade, it was an international protectorate. And for the last 10 years, they have been living in their own state, so I'm sure they are happy about that. On the other side, there are huge challenges, huge problems, some of them from the outside. The unfriendly relationship with Serbia, to say the least, the negative attitude of Russia, the refusal by 5 EU member states to recognize Kosovo, which makes the inclusion of Kosovo in the integration process more difficult. And the internal problems, the economic and social situation, the high unemployment, the high of the younger people, which have to be addressed. So there's an enormous amount of work still to be done.
But what do you see as our biggest success in this decade?
I think the fact that Kosovo exists and that everybody really accepts this, even if not formally recognizing Kosovo. So I think this is the greatest success. But you have always to consider and take into account from where Kosovo started, and so progress is slow, but it is there. So I wouldn't say that a single feature is the great success. It's the continuous movement forward.
After all these years, there's still a dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. President Tadic said that this year should be a final one, an agreement should be reached. How does it going to look?
Well, I would wish that this relationship is normalized today or tomorrow, but it's maybe too much asked. I think my friends in Kosovo must accept one reality, which is that the full inclusion of Kosovo in the international community depends on its relationship with Serbia. This might be disagreeable and unjust, but it's a fact of life which everybody, including the leaders, have to take into account. Therefore, the relationship and the dialogue with Serbia is so important. It must be go on. It must continue. There must be contacts at all levels with the goal of at least establishing a cooperative relationship with a country which will always be Kosovo's neighbor, whatever happens. And in this context, I would also ask my friends to consider one aspect. The Serbian public opinion has been conditioned by 30 years of nationalist propaganda. And there's strong resistance against an accommodation with Kosovo. And leaders like President Vučić have to take public opinion into account. They have voters, they must be confirmed in the next elections, like leaders in Kosovo do. And this explains, maybe, this public opinion explains the zigzag course which President Vučić seems to steer, where he says one day something positive, the next day something negative. My impression is that he genuinely tries to slowly steer this big ship of public opinion into another direction. But therefore, I think one has to be patient, one has to have a goal, but it will not happen tomorrow.
But do you think that President Vučić is the right one to take some very, let's say, courageous decisions about Kosovo, having in mind how strong his party and how strong his show in election is?
Well, first of all, the stronger a party is, the easier it is for them to take certain decisions which might not be popular. Secondly, the more nationalistic a party is, the easier it is for them to make compromises.
As it is the case with President Vučić's party.
It was always, look, think back of Mr. Begin and Israel with Egypt. Nobody else could have made peace with Egypt but Begin, who was a real nationalistic person. So this is an old experience. So yes, I think Vučić is the right person, and whatever his past may be, and we know it, I was active in the Balkans in those days, I believe he is generally interested in this.
Should there be a legal binding agreement at the end of this process?
Well, for me, really the ultimate goal should be a normal formal recognition of Kosovo. Legal binding treaty, I don't know what its value would be. But you know, Ambassador Ischinger in the fall 2006, when he traveled with Troika, America, Russia, EU, to Belgrade, proposed this a copy of the German treaty of 72, I think it was, where without formally recognizing, each side accepted the existence of the other and said, we are not going to prevent any international organization membership and so on. Belgrade refused it at that time. They should have accepted it. And whether this kind of thing is enough, I don't know. For me, the goal should be a normal.
But a formal recognition is very hard to happen, yes. Right? Not now. It will take maybe another several years.
That's true. But here comes in another aspect. It's another reality which I would advise my friends to accept, that the future of Kosovo lies in the European Union. Like all the other countries of the region, it's the same. United States, Russia, Turkey will not be the defining factors for the future stability and prosperity of Kosovo, or the Balkans in general. And I think one should realize this. I know the role of the United States was extremely important, was vital during the liberation struggle. The US government was always very supportive, very helpful also in our process, but it is not going to define the future of Kosovo. Kosovo cannot join the US, Kosovo can join the European Union. Therefore, I would advise the leaders of Kosovo to focus on this, on the membership of Kosovo in the European Union, to stop criticizing EU, Commission, member states. It's counterproductive. To work together with the Commission. The Commission, especially Commissioner Hahn, is a friend of Kosovo. He wants to help. They are in great difficulties, and to include Kosovo in the enlargement strategy, as we see now these days, when Spain tries to prevent it. So work together with these people and with the member states, many of which are good friends, like my country, of Kosovo, and focus on it. And in my view, it is essential that Kosovo tries to catch up with the country which is most advanced in the enlargement process, which is Serbia. It's difficult, especially under the circumstances, but it's not impossible. Because the alternative is that Serbia becomes a member of the EU, while Kosovo remains outside. And that would not be good for Kosovo, binding treaty or not binding treaty.
Here's the issue. Kosovo feels that it's not gaining the much of attention and help, let's say, of European Union. As Serbia moves towards, as a result of the dialogue, our leaders say, Kosovo is stuck. We are the only country isolated without having visa liberalization in the region.
Yeah, but you have to ask for the reasons for this, and this is not the EU, it's Kosovo who is the reason. Kosovo didn't do its homework. Kosovo lost 2 years already on the visa liberalization because of this border agreement with Montenegro. Now, in my view, a border agreement has a technical character. And we dealt during the status talks with the border with Macedonia. And we prescribed a technical commission, and this was done, and the matter is solved. It's not a political problem, it's a technical problem. If you have historic borders, then you have to transfer it into the modern days, and that's it. Now there was as you know, there was a commission from Kosovo who negotiated an agreement. The agreement was signed by the political leadership of Kosovo, and then it was not ratified. And compared to visa liberalization, this border agreement is of really secondary importance. And to lose 2 years because of that is simply frivolous. And may I say this, Kosovo was together with Georgia and Ukraine in a package to receive the visa liberalization. The other two countries received it a year ago, exactly a year ago.
But they didn't have this condition. Ukraine, I mean, a part of Ukraine is like now part of Russia. And people there feel it was an unjust condition by the European Commission for Kosovo.
That may be, but it is a condition and which has to be fulfilled.
We just have to deal with it.
You can dispute it, you can say it's unjust, but I think good politics is to deal with the reality. The reality is that Kosovo wants visa liberalization. The EU member states put forward 2 conditions, they have to be fulfilled.
But we have the current Prime Minister saying that Kosovo loses its land by ratifying this agreement.
But look, when one doesn't lose a border, it doesn't mean ownership. If a farmer on the Austrian border to Bavaria has fields on the other side, he doesn't lose the ownership. He can deal with this field, cultivate the fields. The borders in Europe in general, with the exception of these momentary difficulties with the migration, but normally the borders disappear, they lose their role. So,
but it's Balkans. But it's Balkans for us. You know, the borders are very important in Balkans.
But looking forward, in 10, 20 years, when all these countries will be part of the European Union, I can assure you, borders will slowly disappear. We are not even used anymore to any borders. So I think this border agreement first gains an importance which I think it shouldn't have, compared to the other, which is much more important. And secondly, if a government signs an agreement, then it sticks to it, it ratifies it. If afterwards there are some obvious injustices which occur, which I don't think, I mean, the representative of Kosovo who negotiate this agreement surely are experts, they are aware of the circumstances. I think one can always try in a friendly way to accommodate these difficulties, but the way it has been done is really a pity, because Kosovo could be far ahead. And you know, the visa liberalization, first it's essential for the people, let's say this. But secondly, it's a step towards European integration, and Kosovo must go step by step and as fast as possible.
So you urge the Parliament to adopt it as soon as possible?
Yes.
Now, another issue which is linked to this, and we've seen not several, but at least 2 years of tear gas in the Parliament and protests in the street, is the creation of Association of Municipalities of Serbs in Kosovo. And I think it's kind of foreseen, even in your proposal for independence, that the Serbs can have such an association.
Yes, there I must clarify the issue, because it's indeed true. I personally included it in the Ahtisaari plan. This was taken verbally from the European Charter on Local Self-Government from the Council of Europe. This is a framework agreement which every European state, every member of the Council of Europe has signed, and which deals with matters of local self-government. And there it foresees two ways of cooperations of municipalities. One is a practical one. For instance, if two municipalities which are adjacent decide to organize their fire brigade together or their waste disposal system. These are practical cooperation. That's one. And the second is an association which is meant as a lobby organization. It's not an executive layer of government. It's an interest association, lobby association, advisory association. It should help municipalities to deal with their difficult tasks by advising them, by making studies and whatever, or in their relationship to the central government when it comes, for instance, to budgetary matters. They help the municipalities in the negotiations with the Ministry of Finance. That's the purpose of this association. And we took it verbally from the Charter. Of course, it's differently interpreted by Serbia, who wants to include it as a third layer between central government and municipality with executive powers. The association, how it is intended by the Council of Europe, how we intended it, and how it is practiced in Austria, for instance. We have an association of municipalities. It's a very slim operation with a president, and that's it, in the secretariat, and they advise.
But not an assembly.
No. Well, they might meet once a year, maybe the mayors meet, I don't even know. But the only one in public is the president, who is a kind of, in the social partnership, he plays a role when it goes about salaries or things like that. So it's a highly esteemed function, but not an executive function. The same in Germany and in all the countries.
So the current proposal of, the agreement itself, how it was reached in Brussels, does it go against what you proposed? In Brussels there was agreement on the organization, not on the statute. And in my view, this organogram goes too far compared with what we proposed or what the Council of Europe Charter says. Although I must say, neither the Charter, the European Charter, nor our proposal said any details. We simply said that the municipalities can establish an association. Without going into details, but the spirit is very clear and the experience in other countries is very clear. It's sufficient if one takes, for instance, the statute of the Austrian Association of Municipalities to see what is meant by this institution. And we have a decision of the Constitutional Court which overruled at least 23 articles of the agreement itself, but at the end, do you think that it should be established as Association of Serbian Municipalities?
It should be established, and I would do it fast, but making very clearly when working out the statute, because the essential thing will be the statute. That this is copied from the other European associations and not given an additional function which in no other country this association has. So we don't want a Republika Srpska, we don't want a third layer of advantage. This association should not have any executive competences. This rests with the municipalities.
Recently we have these big discussions in Kosovo. Last December, Kosovo Assembly tried to abolish the special courts. Would it be a wrong move for Kosovo?
Well, this issue has two aspects, really, a fundamental one and a procedural one. First, there are these serious allegations of crime committed between 1998 and 2001. And these allegations of serious crimes hang like a cloud over Kosovo. And I think it's essential for Kosovo and for the people of Kosovo that these allegations be cleared up. Either they are unfounded, then this has to be established through a transparent, open, and respected procedure, a credible procedure. And then, if it's cleared up, everybody is in the clear. Or it turns out that crimes were indeed committed, then it's essential to individualize the guilt and to bring those persons who have committed these crimes to justice. That's how justice works in a state of law. And to those who would be concerned that the reputation of the Kosovo Liberation Army is tarnished by this procedure, I would say first, the role of the Liberation Army is undisputed in the liberation struggle. And second, the contrary is true. If you individualize guilt, you take away the collective guilt of KLA as an institution. And this has to be done. Now, there's the procedural aspect. As you said, the matter had been decided by the Kosovo Assembly many years ago. In the meantime, the financing has been secured with the help of the EU. Appointments have been made, the work has started, and indictments are about to be issued. Now, at this stage, to try to roll back the whole process and to go back on the decision of the Kosovo Assembly is simply not feasible. And the efforts to do this really damage Kosovo's reputation. They appear like an admission of guilt, where there is no guilt proven yet, and I think they should be stopped immediately.
I think they have actually. We have President Thaci just saying, but he was the one that actually was supporting the initiative of 43 MPs to abolish the court in December, and now he's saying that we're not going to do it. In these several weeks, there were a lot of statements, there were a lot of threats, actually, from the UK and US ambassador on Kosovo's grave consequences if it does abolish the court.
Well, I don't want to comment individual statements either from leaders or from ambassadors. I can only say that the whole matter damages Kosovo's reputation as a state of law, as a mature country, and it's really, it should not have happened.
But we have war veterans, and including Prime Minister Haradinaj, which feels that this court is maybe racist because it's only towards Kosovo Albanians. It only deals with Kosovo Albanians, only one ethnic group.
Well, it deals with very specific allegations. And if Mr. Mate would have accused the Serbs of concrete crimes, then there would have been special chambers for this matter. And in any case, the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal, has dealt with many of the crimes committed by Serb citizens or Serb people. I think 80% of those who have been condemned in the ICTY are Serbs. So, in any case, it's not a question whether the other ethnic group also should have their concrete allegations against members of the KLA, and they have to be cleared. And it's not a racist court, it's a normal court of law which will act within Kosovo law, with the special chambers being outside, and it's credible. It's a credible process, and I think Kosovo has to go through this issue and finish this procedure, whatever the outcome may be. That's how it is.
But KLA alleged crimes have been tried before in The Hague, and some processes have been happening in Kosovo again. And people ask, why more? I mean, Prime Minister Haradinaj was acquitted twice himself.
Well, then I'm sure that, I don't know who will be on the list of indictees. But if people are innocent, they have nothing to fear. And it's more important for Kosovo, I think, that these allegations be cleared. They are there now for many years, and I think it was a mistake by the ICTY not to take it up, then the whole thing would have been over by now. And but one has to deal with it. One can't let it hang.
Yeah, and the international community says that we brought this because Kosovo failed to have courts of its own to charge these people for these alleged crimes. But the local politicians say we had UN administration, UN courts for many years, and now we had EU courts for many years. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they try those crimes in Kosovo?
Well, you know, ULEX made probably many mistakes, and so did UNMIC. And even if you admit this, it doesn't mean that the allegations are solved, they're cleared. You have to do it. So if this is now the procedure decided by Kosovo, by the Kosovo Assembly, you have to go through it. You can't say suddenly when it gets to a point where decisions are made, say, no, now we don't want it, we go back. I think it's a wrong policy. It's counterproductive. It's not good for Kosovo. And I know the whole matter is disagreeable, and it may become even more disagreeable depending on who will be the indictees, but they have to go to the process. If people are innocent, then they will be cleared.
You've talked about the Kosovo image with this court, but the whole Dick Marty report is actually around President Thaci. What happens if the president of the country is indicted?
Well, I think that Mr. Thaci will have to decide what he does, and it's not up to me to give any advice. But
no, I was asking about the image of the country. So what happens if the president of the country is alleged for war crimes?
Well, he will take the right decisions, I'm sure, and will have to face this procedure. If it happens, I have no clue whether Mr. Thaci will be involved or not. It is very much, I think, a matter of the chain of command and the responsibility of command. And I think not even Mr. Marty accused Mr. Thaci of doing something himself. It's more the command chain which is the issue. But this will be up to the court to decide. I don't want to get involved in that.
Okay. Recently we have seen a diplomatic battle from Serbia, and they said that several countries have withdrawn their recognitions. Is that even possible?
Well, everything is possible. Every country can do it. We don't know in what way the recognition was done. If it was done in a formal way, then it looks to me very difficult. But let me say to this recognition business also. It's fine that Kosovo achieved 114 or whatever recognition. It was very costly in terms of energy, money, political goodwill, because normally if a new state arrives on the scene, this new state is admitted to the United Nations, and with the admission to the United Nations, it is automatically recognized by all member states. And this country doesn't have to do a single step to gain recognition. Then to assume diplomatic relations is then an individual affair. Unfortunately, because of Russia's attitude, Kosovo didn't have this easy and normal way at its disposal and had to undergo this extremely onerous task of contacting individual country and getting individual recognitions. But now that a majority of the member states of the UN have recognized Kosovo, it's really of a relative secondary importance whether there are 5 more or 10 more. It won't change anything. You see, that the main issue is admission to the UN, and this can only happen if Serbia gives the green light and Russia lifts its veto threat. That's the fact.
Which is so hard to happen, right?
Which is very hard to happen, but that's the fact of life. Moscow has outsourced its Kosovo policy to Belgrade. That's a fact. Therefore, everything depends on the relationship with Serbia, and whether Kosovo has 110 or 114 or 120 or 25 recognitions won't change any. So if I were the leadership of Kosovo, I would pursue this process of recognition, but not as a real priority, and I would not spend too much means of any kind on this issue.
Should this agreement between Kosovo and Serbia include that even if Serbia doesn't formally recognize Kosovo, at least allow it to be a member of UN?
That would be the minimum. That would be the absolute minimum, and there I come back to the German-German treaty, which provided exactly that. When I worked at the United Nations in the first time in the 70s, both Germanys were members even of the Security Council, although they didn't formally recognize each other. So there is a precedent for this. It would be the absolute minimum. The much more, in my view, complicated and important aspect is the membership in the EU. Because if Serbia is a member of the EU, becomes member, while Kosovo remains outside, then we never know what will happen. So we have seen this again and again, that once a country joins the EU, it can more or less do what it wants. And
but Kosovo hopes it will be together. I mean, everyone in Kosovo hopes, and
too.
There are a lot of statements from EU that they should be
I hope
together.
too, and therefore my repeated advice was focus on the EU, focus on advancing to the EU, with all the difficulties I know, and the present Spanish attitude shows how difficult it will be.
Can they actually block
Yes,
Kosovo?
Yes. Any country can block it. Any one country can block it.
And they mean business, I think, this time, especially with the Catalonia issue.
Look, when we worked with Martti Ahtisaari on this, on the proposal, when we had presented it, we went around to all members of the Security Council and all important members in the EU, and we tried to convince Spain, which was the most difficult one, that their policy is wrong for many reasons. First of all, the case of Kosovo is such a special case with the history of the last 20 years before independence, which has no comparison with any other secession movement. And by intimating that this is a precedent for Catalonia, Spain also admits in a way that it has treated Catalonia badly, which is not the case. Catalonia has its autonomy, it was never oppressed, there was no fighting, there was no international interference, etc., etc. It's a totally different case, and we told our Spanish friends, why don't you say this and say, of course we recognize Kosovo, it's a different matter, it has nothing to do with Basques or Catalonians, and it would be much easier for you. Unfortunately, they didn't listen. And the other cases are even more absurd, because in Catalonia there is a secession movement, in Slovakia there's none, in Romania there's none, in Greece there's none.
But at least we have friendly relations with these countries. We can use our passports and go there.
That's what I would add, that all these countries, including Greece, have been extremely accommodating and pragmatic. I think it's a pity that the five didn't use the decision, the opinion by the International Court of Justice in 2010 to say, okay, now the court has said that the Independence Declaration is not contradictory to international law, now regular. We had hoped this might happen, unfortunately it didn't.
That was what I was going to question you next. Did you feel satisfied, seeing this decision of the International Court of Justice that, I mean, Kosovo independence is illegal, and do you think that Kosovo didn't use it enough for its good?
Well, I think it did it in terms of efforts for recognitions. It did it. Then the other side says, well, the court said only that the Independence Declaration was not in contradiction with international law. It didn't say anything about the substance of independence. So the Kosovo side says quite rightly that, or the court says it, this was not the question. The question was, is the independent declaration in contradiction with, and we simply replied to it. We were not asked to study the whole substance of the independence. But it's a very clear decision nevertheless, and it could have been used by the five to change their views.
What your advice be for the Kosovo politicians on how to tackle corruption and organized crime, which actually are like criteria for joining European Union?
Well, this is a difficult issue in our countries. I mean, if you look around the world, there's hardly a country which doesn't have crime, corruption to various degrees. And it's very difficult to fight them. We in Austria have established a special prosecutor for economic corruption, because we found out that the regular prosecutors don't have the know-how to follow up these sometimes very difficult and very hidden ways in which corruption works. And every country has a problem. It is a fact that the poorer a country is, the more damaging corruption is. A rich country can stand a certain amount of corruption, but if financial means are short and then they are siphoned off, this is really harmful. And we can only say yes, the fight against corruption has to be intensified. What would be needed is that several procedures be concluded, and that in several cases people are condemned actually for corruption. Then you can, Kosovo could tell the EU, well, we satisfied one of your two conditions. There is progress in the corruption. It must be visible.
But there is no political will to do so.
Pardon?
There is no political will to do so.
Well, this is the same problem in many countries. I won't mention them, but you can imagine which countries I mean, where, of course, those in power have no interest really in changing. This is, in my view, a scourge which inflicts many countries and will take a long time to eradicate it. It may take another generation of people, who stop these things.
And on the way how these Kosovo leaders behaved towards this special chambers issue in the last few weeks, do you think they endangered the relations, the friendly relations with EU and the US?
Well, endanger the relations is maybe too much said, but it certainly is counterproductive. It doesn't throw a good light on the maturity of the society of Kosovo and of its leaders and of its institutions. If a parliament takes a decision, this decision is valid, and you don't try to go back on it a couple of years later. And also, again, I come back to what I said. I think the KLA should understand how important it is to clear this matter once for all. Otherwise, there will be always a suspicion, always a shadow, and that's not good for the institution either.
Let's talk at the end about the past. How do you remember the talks which were held here in Vienna between Kosovo and Serbia? How was the time?
Well, I remember them as highly interesting. I knew, of course, all sides very well. My first post was Belgrade, diplomatic post. I was the first foreign official who met with President Koštunica when he was on the day of his swearing in the morning of his swearing in day. I spent 2 hours with him. In the late afternoon, the ceremony took place. I had many friends in Serbia, I had many friends in Kosovo. I knew the whole Kosovo leadership for many years. So I felt like mediating among friends, really. And Ahtisaari the same. Ahtisaari had been involved for a long time in the Balkan affairs. I had worked with, or he was a colleague in the 70s when we appointed him. I was then the chief of staff of the UN Secretary General. We appointed him as Commissioner for Namibia. So it was a very interesting time. One thing which probably outside one doesn't know that much is first the very conscientious close contacts we maintained with the contact group. First we got guiding principles from the contact group, which among other things said no partition, no union with another country, etc. And we had every month a meeting with the contact group on various levels. And then Ahtisaari had one brilliant idea. He asked the European Union, Russia and the United States to send liaison officers into our mission. It created a lot of bureaucratic problems with our administration in New York because they felt that they are outsiders, they can't work in our office, and Ahtisaari said, no, if they come, they have to work like everybody else. So the Russians didn't use this possibility, the EU did. Stefan Lehne was the representative. And the United States did. They sent us 2 officers. One was a constitutional expert, which worked very well with us. And we also had a high-ranking Russian colleague in our mission, a UN diplomat. So everybody knew everything, and it was totally transparent. The talks itself were very concrete on details of the municipality borders, of decentralization, of minority. It went very much into details. And we had a kind of division of labor with Ahtisaari. I chaired most of the regular sessions, and he chaired the 2 so-called elephant rounds when the presidents and prime ministers were present. And the other division of labor was, which nobody knew, but it happened, that Marty concentrated on the big powers. He went to Peking, he went to Moscow, he went to Washington. Sometimes I went with him, but I concentrated on the regional powers. I went to the neighboring countries, and because I knew them better than Ahtisaari, and Ahtisaari had more weight in the big capitals than I had. So that was a very, very good division of labor. If you would ask me, was I disappointed? I say yes, I was disappointed, but in 2 ways. When it turned out that an agreement on status was impossible, that was very clear very quickly. We tried to devise a way that both sides would get something. And the Ahtisaari plan is a compromise, you know. On the one hand, there's independence for Kosovo, there's a few minor restrictions. On the other hand, there are enormous measures in order to safeguard the Serbian community in Kosovo. The minority legislation in Kosovo is more advanced than any legislation of this kind anywhere in the world. And this is also the reason why Kosovo got so many recognitions. It was, in a way, the price for independence and for recognition. And my disappointment was that Belgrade was only thinking of territory and gave very little attention to all the positive sides which were in this Ahtisaari plan for their Serbian community. And it took several years until the Serbs in Kosovo realized what enormous possibilities they got in taking part in the decision-making process, in running their own affairs through decentralization and so on. I think they have now understood that and make use of. That was the one disappointment. And the other one was the Russian attitude. We had reason to believe around to beginning of 2006 that Russia would accept independence. There were statements which were quite clear to the Americans in particular, and by Mr. Lavrov. And the fact that Lavrov signed up to a statement which the foreign ministers of the contact group made in London in January 2006, which says the settlement must be acceptable to the people of Kosovo. Since 90% of the Kosovars want independence, it was very clear what it meant, and Lavrov signed it. And then in the spring of 2006, there was an obvious change or hardening of the Russian position, and the Russians rejected everything which was based on independence. Why this was, we don't know. Whether it was President Putin who got involved or not. In any case, there was a clear change of position, and that was a pity, because otherwise the Ahtisaari plan would have been endorsed by the Security Council.
How long did it take to write the proposal?
Well, it took us about 2-3 months. And
who was working on it? How many people were working on it?
Well, it was like that. Martti Ahtisaari was sort of the big boss. I was running the actual working in detail, and we had, depending on the issues, we had others for instance, the matter of the Serb Orthodox Church. We had Stefan Leni, who helped with the economic and property matters. I was with Mr. Schlagek, a German, who was dealing mainly with the decentralization issues. Then we had outside assistance. We had the Venice Commission, for instance, who sent somebody who worked with us on the constitution. I can tell you only one thing. There is not a single word in this proposal which hasn't been gone through a dozen times. I insisted on that we read it again and again and again. What does it mean? How far do we go? What do we want to prescribe to the Kosovars? What is better to live in their own decision? So this was a very careful, and the interesting thing is that there was not a single voice afterwards which said this is wrong, which is in there. I mean, they might have rejected the whole proposal, but no detail was ever put into question by anybody, and this was a great satisfaction.
Were you ever considering another option?
Well, we had two options. When it turned out that we can't reach an agreement, the one was the easy one, to go back to the Secretary General and say, sorry, we can't reach an agreement. We tried half a year, negotiations, everything, but we can't reach an agreement. We hand back our mandate and let the thing go. What the consequence would have been that the international presence, ANMIC, KFOR, very soon would have been considered as an occupation force in Kosovo. And that it was not difficult to predict that eventually there would have been resistance against the international presence. And that would have been catastrophic, both for Kosovo and for the international community. So we felt that it was our mandate, or the sense of our mandate, to solve the problem. And since we couldn't reach an agreement, we felt it was our task to propose one, which was based on the history of Kosovo, on the realities on the ground, on the principles of the contact group, and on what we learned in these 6 months of negotiations.
Actually, I was thinking exactly that. Like, if you were ever considering proposing like a greater autonomy of Kosovo, something short of a greater autonomy for Kosovo, anything short of independence.
There's nothing. You see, the problem is you can't merge independence with not independence. I mean, you can have autonomy, but then you go back to the old situation. And actually, one of the guiding principles of the contact group was no return to the pre-March situation in 1999, which means Serbian administration. So this was already by the contact group excluded. And to go back to the autonomy of before 81, or whenever at 80 was abolished, I think, after all that happened, after all the oppression, after the killings, after the military, it was simply impossible. It was impossible. And also taking into account the situation in Kosovo, anything short of independence would have been unacceptable to 90% of the people. So this we never really considered.
Were there tensions? Do you ever remember like people shouting at each other?
Well, between the delegations, yes. When we started the first meeting, which I chaired, I let them speak. And they were almost not shouting. Shouting is too much said, but very
Loud?
aggressive. No, it was not the noise. It was the meaning of the words. It was very aggressive from both sides. And my colleagues sitting next to me were a bit uneasy and said, shouldn't you stop? I said, no. I said, it's important to let steam off. Let them say, each of them in the delegations, they can accuse the other side whatever they want. And then that was the morning session. We had 3 hours of morning session. And then in the afternoon I said, no. So now you have let steam off. You said what you had to say. Now we turn to something more constructive and try to organize our work. And from then on, it was, yes, I've seen worse during my time at the UN in New York.
But can you remember someone being like, from any delegation, being like, let's say, more aggressive, more loud, talking more?
No, because you see, the Serbian delegates, they were highly professional. I forgot now the name, I must say it.
The technical ones?
The leaders of the delegation.
Košunica was, and Tadić, President Tadić.
No, on the
other level.
On the working level, they were very professional and very well spoken. They spoke very good English, and they wouldn't shout. That's not their style.
The Kosovans did.
No.
I remember Mr. Haziri, right?
Yeah,
but Haziri was part of the delegation.
Yeah, he was leading most of the time. No, he was. No, it was the shouting was not the problem. I remember at one time the Serbian delegation came to me and said, "Well, the next meeting will be about church affairs, and we have all these bishops." And I said, "Please be careful if Mr. Artemir, Bishop Artemir, starts to speak, because we never know what he's going to say." And I said, "Yes, but if he demands the floor, I have to give him the floor. You know, he is a member of your delegation. You have to decide who speaks for you." And he spoke, and he was quite reasonable. So, no, we never had it was always civilized, and we had always these luncheons, you know, between the meetings, which was an informal buffet, and sometimes even we could join together from the various delegations. No, the atmosphere was civilized.
Did anyone share jokes during the negotiations?
No.
It was that serious?
Yeah, it was not chocolate, I think.
it was serious stuff. Where were you when Kosovo declared independence?
I was in Vienna. I was here. That was, I was as expected. You know, after we had presented our proposal, Martti Ahtisaari and I went to New York, and we lobbied with every member of the Security Council. And we spent 2 weeks in New York and talked to everybody. And as it turned out, it was sure that China and Russia would veto, and South Africa and Indonesia would vote against it. But 11 votes would be in favor. You need 9 to pass a resolution if there's no veto. So it was it was okay, but then we saw that Russia and China didn't change their mind, so we left. And then the Serbian side always said, well, we finished the whole negotiation, or Russia said this rather, too quickly, and they should give time and so. And Mate Ahtisaari said, well, it's useless. There's no movement, and there's no movement to be expected, so we can talk for another 2 years, it won't change anything. And then came the idea that one last effort is being made. And Ahtisaari said, yes, but it should not be us. It should be somebody connected, but not us who tries. And then came this troika with Ischinger and the Russian and an American. And they went to Belgrade, and that's when he made the proposal of the German treaty. And after 1 month of effort, they came to the same conclusion as we did, that it's hopeless, and gave up. And then only did we present, then in February 2007, we presented our plan. We flew first to Belgrade and met with President Koštunica. Then we went to Pristina and met with the team of Unity. And
was it difficult to talk to Koštunica? Was it difficult to talk to Koštunica to give him that proposal?
No.
He knew?
Well, he knew. He knew, although what rarely happens in international circumstances is that the exact text was never leaked to anybody. And we were so careful that in the office, when we worked on it, after we worked on it, everybody had to give up their copies, and they were put into a steel cupboard and closed. And so nobody could take it. And then later on, when people individually, they got numbers. And each person who got a copy in the office got a number. So we would have known who leaked it to the press. So I remember in coming to Pristina and we handed over these copies, and they all started to look in the page because they were not sure how we had formulated certain things. I had made certain commitments to them about the content, and they looked whether it was really whether I had kept my promises. And so it was a rare occasion where there was no leak.
And you're considered a great friend of Kosovo, and you come there, you've been several times. Do you feel proud of your work with Kosovo?
Yes, I talked often with Ahtisaari about it, and he, like me, say we are satisfied. We are not satisfied with how it developed afterwards, but we are satisfied with the fact that we cut the Gordon knot. You know, the Kosovo problem was unsolvable, and we solved it. Now, it is not recognized, the solution, by everybody, but it will be. And I think this was our mandate, and this was our obligation, and this we did to the best of our abilities. And if we certainly helped Kosovo, we had hoped that we also serve Serbia to get rid of this problem. It turned out differently, but that's how it is.
And at the end, what do you wish to Kosovo people in our 10th anniversary of independence?
Well, I don't want to be presumptuous in giving advice to our friends in Kosovo. I just want to repeat what I said during the last 10 years. You know, the times during the status talks when all political forces of Kosovo united behind a common purpose, which was independence, the theme of unity. It really worked well for the people of Kosovo. And I highly regretted it, that this spirit of common purpose disappeared after independence. And that so much time and energy is spent on internal politics, on party competition, which is legitimate in a democracy, but still it takes too much of a place, in my view, compared with the real problems which exist. If a country has such huge challenges to overcome, such huge problems, part of which it's not the fault of Kosovo, it comes from outside, but it has to be overcome, then it is the wise thing to do is to unite all political forces, all energies, and try together to overcome it. There will be time for politicking in the future. I remember the situation in Austria after the war, when we had an occupation, we had a destroyed country, a destroyed economy, and everybody united really in this one purpose to get rid of the foreign occupation and to overcome these challenges. Communists and conservatives and everybody worked together, and that served us well. And I wish that first there would be more unity, and second, a greater focus on the real vital problems for Kosovo.
Thank you very much for talking to us.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.